Brian Miller's TEDx talk on human connection has done over 3.7 million views. The framework used to write it fits on one page. I invite him back on the podcast because in 2026, the smartest person in the room is losing to the loudest. If you're a tech founder, a researcher, a scientist, a real expert in something that actually matters, this conversation is for you. Brian wrote the One-Page Keynote for one reason: to give the people who have to speak the same advantages as the people who want to speak. And in this conversation, you will learn his entire framework shared in the book. The exact 8 questions every audience is silently waiting for you to answer. How to capture your audience attention in the first minute, keep them listening for the full length of your talk, influence how they will think so you can change behavior. Before we start, make sure to open in a new tab the book link that is down below, since it's just 99 cents on Amazon today. The book, together with the conversation, will give you the tools to design a speech that makes your ideas clear and leaves people think differently. Let's get into it. Brian, by the end of this conversation, what are people going to learn?
By the end of this conversation, the most important thing to me is that people walk away understanding that design beats delivery every time when you're speaking to create change.
And I know you wrote the One-Page Keynote for a specific group of people: scientists, academics, researchers, and industry leaders. Why this group exactly needs a specific structure to these speeches, now more than ever?
Why write it for this group? Proper experts, quote unquote, academic scientists, researchers, industry leaders, tech founders, people who are real serious experts. Why write a book on speech design for these people? Well, I didn't originally. Actually, I wrote this book twice. So first time I wrote it, it took about 9 months from the time I sat down to start typing until I was done writing the book. Years to come up with the book I was going to write, but about 9 months to actually write it. And then I went away from it. I put it away. I didn't think about it for about a month, went on with my life. Came back one day, sat down in my office, opened up my laptop, and just started reading. And I read the entire book from start to finish in a couple of hours. And when I was done, I closed my laptop, looked up at the wall, and I heard myself say out loud, "Nope, that wasn't it." And I realized I had written the right book, but for the wrong people. The first time I wrote the book, I had people like me in mind. I had professional speakers, people who want to get paid to speak, who want to get booked at professional speaker fees, or rebooked or referred or build their speaking career. And this book absolutely helps those people. My frameworks absolutely will help those people. But I realized those weren't really the people that I deeply cared about serving. That actually the people that I care about are the people who don't want to speak. They're the people who have to speak. They are the experts who know so much about a particular area of human existence, whether it's marine biology or cybersecurity or the law. They're experts in an area. And they have to speak because they're often given opportunities, whether by their bosses or by their industry or by the world, to explain their ideas to groups of non-experts who need to understand it, they need to buy in, and most importantly, they need to take some action. A marine biologist might need a room full of politicians to support their research. A tech founder might need a room full of investors to invest in their technology. An activist or an advocate in human trafficking might need public support in their community to get a new law passed, right? These are people who know a lot, who need non-experts, people not like them, to buy in, and they routinely either flub speaking opportunities because they have no idea how to build a talk and to make it understandable and relevant and actionable to non-experts. Or worse, they turn down speaking opportunities because they're worried about not doing a good job. And I thought the biggest impact I could possibly have on the world is not helping professional speakers make a little bit more money and get a little bit more gigs. It's helping people who have ideas that are genuinely pushing humanity forward, make sure that those ideas are understandable and actionable to the people who need to hear them.
It's interesting because if I scroll now on any social media platform or YouTube feed and so on, I see less and less experts. Because the loudest voices out there are those of social media influencers and people that actually deliver their message very clearly, very on point, is structured well, and so on. And people believe them, even if their ideas are not the right ones.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, because really the big problem of the day when we're recording this in 2026 is no longer attention, it's trust, right? Attention is cheap, attention is easy. I was at a baseball game when I was about 10 years old with my dad, and I'll never forget as long as I live. At one point in between innings, a naked man jumped from the stands into the field and just streaked across the field. He got everyone's attention, right? 20,000 people, 30,000, whatever it was, he had our attention. I don't know his name. I don't know what he stood for. I don't know what he did. Attention is cheap. Attention is easy. Attention is not enough. Earning trust is the game today, because one, we live in an age where there's more noise, right, than ever before. And so choosing where to spend our attention is getting harder and harder. We live in the AI age, where I don't even know really if what I'm looking at, watching, reading, listening to was done by a human. We also live in an age where we've gone through, just in the past, 10 years, we've gone through multiple major global crises, including, of course, the pandemic. And so we are in what many people are calling a trust recession. And on top of that, we had a trust recession that collided with something that is sometimes called the anti-expert age, or the anti-knowledge age, right? There's been a death of expertise, which is not to say there are actually less experts. It's just that people aren't paying attention to them, where once experts had trouble getting through because they were just so confusing to listen to. Now, experts are not only confusing to listen to, but if you have legitimate expertise, somehow people think you're even less trustworthy. You must be part of the system, right? Because if you have a PhD, or if you have licensing or credentials, that you're a gatekeeper to knowledge, man. And so it's the people from outside the system that are the real truth tellers. And this is very dangerous. It's very dangerous, because there's a reason there are gatekeepers. There's a reason that people have credentials and spend decades of their life buried in research and study. They know the nuance, they know the depth, they know the edge cases. Experts are not always right, but they are far more likely to be right. And they're more likely to be right in ways that non-experts would never expect. So all of that is to say, why aren't we seeing them? Why are we seeing influencers all over our news feeds? It's because they've learned how to borrow the language of branding, package their ideas, even when they're wrong. So influencers, and I'm not saying that influencers are all bad or nefarious. I think most of these people are trying to get good ideas out into the world. They're trying to help people, but they do not actually know these topics. They don't know marine biology. They don't know mental health at the level of credentialed experts. They don't know when advice they're giving is good for some people but bad for others, when to put a disclaimer, when to not. And so if you, an expert, cannot figure out how to be equally, if not more, but at least equally compelling in your communication, then your field will continue to be explained by non-experts to the public. And this is very bad for humanity.
And that's a huge enough reason to build something that not just move people to action, but lasts the test of time and actually allows you, as you mentioned, to share your expertise, to share the truth behind your long life work. And when you build this structure of the one-page keynote and having them in mind, where do you start? Like, what's the most common mistake they are making when they usually write their speeches or keynotes?
Yeah, it's a great question. So where do experts typically go wrong if they're going to put a presentation together? And of course, this is largely true of pretty much everybody. It's not just, quote, experts. Anybody who's going to give up and give a talk almost always goes wrong in similar ways. It just happens to have a much worse impact when experts do it. So where do people go wrong? The number one place people go wrong is they ask the question, what do I want to say? Because they've got all this knowledge. They know so much and they're being given 20 minutes. And they're like, okay, of all the things I know, what are the things that I want to say? Which means they're really asking, what do I find most interesting at this moment? But the speech isn't for you. It's for the audience. The audience are not experts, right? We're not talking about when a marine biologist is speaking in a room full of other marine biologists who all work on the exact same program. They can do whatever they want. They don't need to listen to me, right? When you're talking amongst yourselves, speak your special secret language. You know how to do that. That's not the situation that most people find themselves in. They find themselves in a situation where they're talking to a room of people who are not like them at all. And so they ask, what do I want to say? And so they stack their presentation full of the most interesting bullet points that they can think of in their topic. And that tends to be the stuff, because of the recency bias, that they're most recently working on as well, because we're always most excited about the newest thing. The problem is, the question you should be asking is, what does the audience need to hear? In other words, what you want to say is, one, perhaps not even possible for the audience to understand, and two, things that you think are interesting may not be interesting to the audience at all because they lack the context that you have. We think sometimes, I'm just gonna, I'll say, this particular mollusk has 3 times more eyes than the average mollusk. I don't even know if mollusks have eyes. I don't even know what a mollusk is. I don't know what I'm talking about. But imagine I said that, this particular kind has 3 times more eyes than the average mollusk. Is that interesting to you? Is that useful? You don't know. You don't know how many they normally have, what that would benefit, how 3 times, was that good for them or bad for them? Is that good? We have no idea, because I don't know the context of your field the way you do. So things that you think are interesting or important are rarely interesting or important to the audience. And so in order to build a better presentation, what you need to do is start by asking the question, what does the audience need to hear? And the only way to answer that is to actually know what you're there to do. What is the purpose of a speech? And my argument is the purpose of a speech is to change behavior, right? You could say to create action, but what we really mean is to change behavior. If you have talked for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and nobody changes what they do or think as a result of your talk, I mean, maybe it was interesting, but to what end? There's plenty of other ways that I can engage with content that is interesting. I can pick up tidbits and interesting facts anywhere. If you're going to take my attention for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour in a room, tell everyone in the room to shut the hell up and just listen to you, you really may as well be creating some kind of change, right? Otherwise, why are we doing this?
Exactly. And speaking of that, you share in the book 8 questions, if I remember correctly. Can you share those and why they are so important to start with?
Yeah, okay. So you're referring to the 8 questions, which is kind of the thesis of this book, is essentially that I have noticed from 20 years of being on stage, a decade of giving speeches and working with speakers, hundreds of speakers in 30 plus different content areas all over the world. I've discovered that the way to build a speech is simply to answer the questions the audience is already asking themselves and answer them in the order that they're asking them. In other words, I believe that a keynote speech in particular, that a keynote speech is not merely a series of interesting points. It is a sequence of interesting answers to questions the audience is already asking. And if you just answer the questions they're asking in the order that they ask them, everybody is happy, you create change, people feel like it was magic, everybody wins. So then the question becomes, what are those questions? What are they asking and in what order? The first question everybody asks when a speaker walks up on stage is this important? Is this worth my time? Is this relevant to me? Right? Pick your favorite way of phrasing that. The first question everybody asks is, should I pay attention to this? And I got to tell you something. Most speakers fail immediately by simply not answering that question. Most speakers walk up on stage. You've seen it. They walk up, they say hi, they thank the organizer, they start chatting with the front row, they mention about the weather, they say something about how late their flight was, or sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. There's just so many things people say when they get on stage that have nothing to do with the topic. And even if they do start their speech without any of the nonsense that we just talked about, often they start with the point they're trying to make, which would be something like, we got to save the whales. Right? And it's like, yeah, but the audience you're trying to convince them of that. You can't start there, right? And so the first question you have to answer is this important to me? Should I pay attention to this? And so the beginning of your speech, in fact, the first words out of your mouth have to establish the answer to that question has to be yes. You have to start with something the audience already believes is important to them or believes is relevant to them.
And in that moment, like, how do you know that? Of course, you do the preparation. You know, in theory, who will be in that room. But how do you truly know if that subject that you're about to share, it's important to them? How do you make it broad enough or appealing enough for them?
Yeah, so this is a combination of knowing your audience and knowing your topic. What this really comes down to are psychographics, not demographics. So you're giving a speech, which means there's an audience, which means there are listeners. Listeners are people, and people have preferences, and they have desires, or you call wants. They have problems or obstacles. They have fears. They have beliefs. And so we need to know who is out there. Now, most of the time, if you're giving a talk, you will know who is going to be in the audience. It's very rare that somebody's like, involuntary speech, I'm grabbing someone off the street, here's a group of people, go. You know what I mean? That doesn't happen, right? You know at least somewhat who's going to be in the audience. And here's the thing. I have talked to speakers who apparently do not know who's in the audience, and yet they've been booked to speak. Like, they're like, I'm speaking at an event in 6 weeks, and I need help building the speech. And I go, great, who's going to be in the audience? And they go, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And they're like, it's an event for whatever. And I'm like, okay, did you ask the organizer what the makeup of the audience is? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, go back and ask the organizer. Like, somebody knows, right? And the questions you want to ask are, who are they? What do these people want, right? Like what are they trying to get? What are they, like, when they're coming to this event, when they're coming to this speech, what are they thinking about? What are they trying to get? What do they want? And the important question here is, what do they know that they want, right? What do they think they're there to get out of this, right? Not what do you think they need, just what do the people walking in know that they want? Why are they struggling to get it? So what do they want? Why are they struggling to get it? Again, why do they think they're struggling? There's a lot of times when people are struggling to get something and you go, oh, you're struggling because you're addressing this the wrong way. It's like, good, hang on to that thought. We're going to come back to that later. Right now, just know why they think they're struggling. What are they afraid of? And what do they believe? And so if you start with that, any one of those or a combination of those, want, problem, belief, fear, any one of those or a combination of them forms the premise of your talk. Any one of them will answer the question, is this important to me? Do I need to pay attention to this, right? Do I need to pay attention to this? So almost always a want plus a problem is the way to get people's attention. I'm going to give a talk on human connection, and I walk up on stage, and the first thing I say are, we need to make more meaningful connections with people. Is that what people want? Maybe. Depends on the audience, but I'll tell you what happened. A couple of years ago, post-COVID, the first time I went out to give speeches at college campuses after the pandemic, I went to go give my typical human connection keynote speech. I'd been giving it for a long time, very successful in college campuses, real popular. And I went up on stage and I started talking about meaningful connection and how we all want to make meaningful connections. And I just got blank stares from these kids, these freshmen in college, these 18, 19-year-olds, just blank stares. I saw eye rolls. I saw arms crossed. Students walked out a couple of times in these speeches. And I went, what is happening? I've given this speech for a million years. It's worked over and over again. And what I finally realized had happened is that the students were thinking differently than they were pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, students wanted to make meaningful connections, but they didn't know how. So that was the wanted problem. We all want to make meaningful connections, but we don't know how. Post-pandemic, at least for the first couple of years, it's come back around. But for a couple of years there, students were like, I do not want to make meaningful connections. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to see anybody. I want to be by myself in a bubble. So you can't start with, we all want to make meaningful connections, because they're like, we do not. And then they're out. That was it. They're gone, right? Like immediately you lose them. This was a huge challenge for me. And I was just like, okay, like, do I just stop giving this talk? Do I stop speaking to students? Like, what do I do? This talk doesn't work anymore. How am I going to talk about connection to a room full of people that don't want to connect with anyone? And then it occurred to me, what do students want? Well, they want opportunities. That's why they're in school. There's no other reason to go to college unless you're seeking opportunities. So I rebuilt the beginning of my talk. We all want great opportunities. And I would say something like, but we tend to be looking around the world, staring up into the sky, wishing for great opportunities to fall into our lap. And the problem is, while we're looking up in the sky, we're missing all of the opportunities that are right in front of us. And you know why we miss them? Because great opportunities don't look like opportunities. Great opportunities look like people. People hold the opportunities you're looking for. And unless you figure out how to speak with and connect with people, you're not going to get those opportunities. So the entire talk was reframed, and it just sucked everybody in. Now I wasn't starting with something that they didn't want. I was starting with something they wanted and telling them this thing they didn't want to do was the only path to get it. And then I gave the same talk, but a totally reframe on the beginning of it to get everybody to answer the question, yes, this is relevant to me.
As you mentioned earlier, most speeches fail already there. But if they do this work flawlessly and the audience, they are like hooked, what's the next question the audience asks themselves?
Yeah, so the next question people ask after they're sure the talk is relevant to them is, does this really matter? Now, you might think that's like a version of the same question, but the nuance here is important. The first question we ask is, should I pay attention to this? It's just, should I not continue being on email or Instagram or whatever? That's just attention. That is not engagement. The next question starts to buy you engagement, which is they go, does this really matter? Because here's the thing, like, Gabe, I'm sure you know this. I'm sure you can think about things in your life that are broken that you have not bothered fixing. Well, I walk around my house every day. I say out loud, we got to fix that. Haven't done it. The last house I lived in, for 5 years I lived in that house, I complained about the fridge every day. When we bought the house, the water line, it was one of those fancy new fridges that had a water dispenser on the outside. Very convenient, except it was broken when we bought the house. We knew it when we bought the house. And for 5 years, I complained that the water line was broken, but we never fixed it. Because just because we want something, just because we're struggling with something, doesn't mean we feel it's important enough, that it really matters enough to deal with it at this moment. It's a priorities issue, right? In other words, you need to tell the audience what's at stake if they don't get what they want, or if they continue to struggle with their obstacle. You need to remind them, what's at stake if you don't do this thing, right? And nobody ever did that for me with the water line in the fridge. Nobody ever told me why it mattered. All I thought it mattered is that it was annoying that I couldn't get water, but all I did was open the fridge and grab my Brita filter and pour water in. It was no big deal until I came home one day from a work trip and my kitchen was flooded. It was flooded. And what had happened is the water line wasn't just broken, it was deteriorating. And eventually, it leaked. And it leaked while I was out of town. And then I had to spend thousands of dollars calling repair people to come fix it, which I should have done in the first place, but also people to clean up the water, deal with the damage to the wood, and all these other things. And simply because at no point did anybody say to me, or did I realize, it's not just annoying that you can't get water. Eventually, this will flood your kitchen if you don't deal with it. Had I known that, I would have dealt with it. It would have been a couple $100 once, and I would have stopped complaining about water for 5 years, right? So the second question people ask is, does this really matter? And so you have to make sure they understand what's at stake.
It's usually interesting to see that when people truly realize, all right, this is something that I'm going to lose if I don't pay attention right now. They absorb themselves in the talk, they pay attention, they don't stay on the phone, and so on. And then maybe the speaker throw at them stats, details, jargons, and so on, and they lose them again. How they can avoid that? What's the next question the audience asks themselves to still be there at paying attention rather than scrolling?
Yeah, rather than just disappearing into endless slides of bullet points and jargon, and graphs that have no context. Yeah, it's so tempting, isn't it? It's the easy. Every time I'm on a plane and I can see somebody with PowerPoint up on their laptop, I'm like, they're fucked. Because they're on their way to a presentation. You know, the only people doing PowerPoint in a plane are on their way to a presentation. I'm like, if you are working in your slides and you're on your way to a presentation, you've already lost. You may as well close your laptop and give up. So how do we stop that? Well, this is where the humanity comes in, because like you might be thinking this, or like your listeners might be thinking, okay, but I've heard for speaking, all the advice around speaking, if you go read the books and go to LinkedIn and look at the speaker coaches that show up on your news feeds, they're all talking about voice. They're all talking about presence. They're all talking about authenticity. Where does all that come in to this? And it's like, well, part of that comes in right now at the third question, which is the third question people ask is, okay, but why should I listen to you specifically? Right? So let's say they're with you. You got their attention because you answered, is this worth my time? Right? Do I need to pay attention to this? And you're like, yes, you do. This is relevant to you. Great. Does it really matter? Yes, the stakes are high. You should fix this and you should do it soon. Okay, I'm in. But why wouldn't I just grab my phone, open ChatGPT, and get the answer from the world's most foremost experts in that topic? Why should I listen to some former magician with large eyebrows that I've never heard of, right? Why? And so you must tell a story at this point. This is the time to tell what we call the story hook, but a story that qualifies you uniquely to answer this question or to take the audience on this journey. Because there's such an access today. It's not 1987. It's not even 2007 anymore. People have so much access. Like if I'm talking about human connection, why wouldn't people just go look up Brene Brown and tune me out? Even if they agree that what I'm talking about is useful, why not just go listen to her? She's way more famous than me. Plus, she's a researcher. Why me? And so I have to tell a story that tells the audience, I have a perspective on this topic you cannot get anywhere else. It's got to come from my lived experience, something I've been through, something I've gone through, something I've noticed that nobody else could have, which is why in my famous TED Talk on human connection, I told the story of the blind guy in the restaurant and continue to do that in my keynote speeches. And we talked about that a little bit last time I was on your show. We're not going to go into that now. But the question for you is, why are you uniquely qualified? What happened in your life? Tell me about a moment in time, one time when you discovered this problem, overcame this problem, solved this problem, realized the way forward. Tell me something that only you could tell me so that I now know for the rest of this speech that you are somebody I need to hear about this topic, even if you're not famous or I've never heard of you before.
That led me to a personal question that probably others resonates a lot with, because often we think that what we know or our story is not powerful enough, trustworthy enough to build that connection authority that you mentioned, and people to truly see us, all right, your perspective matters. And the thing that I'm working on is to use how our common friend Chris Do will tell us, our shadow, like the thing that initially we still maybe see it as a flaw or as something that is not helping us. And in my case is that I'm a generalist. I'm not an expert in anything, but I know enough in many fields to be dangerous in what I do. So that generalist part, how to be able to dig and find that story, to simply share, all right, I'm a generalist because I'm curious. I try so many things along my life that led to me knowing so many things about so many different topics and being adaptable enough, resourceful enough to apply those into the work that I do, into my life and so on. Or it needs to be something different, something that make the audience say, all right, I trust Gabe because this and that and that.
Mm-hmm. So there's actually two different parts of what you just asked. So let me take those one at a time. The first thing I need to address is you said, I'm not an expert, I'm a generalist. That is only something that experts say. So just for what it's worth, the only people who you can be sure are experts are people who reject the term. When you say you're an expert and they go, no, I'm not. And you're like, you can be pretty sure they're an expert. Because what I mean by expert is relative to the people you're speaking with. Relative, like Gabe, you may say, first of all, you are an expert in web design. But let's say if I said you're going to claim you're not an expert in web design. I go, compared to a random guy you met at Starbucks? You're like, of course you are. You are absolutely an expert. You're infinitely more knowledgeable at it than random guy at Starbucks, right? So relative to the people you're speaking with, you are an expert, and a lot of folks need to. That's a very internal. This is like a therapy thing, but like you need to understand that. Like you need to be okay with the fact that you don't need to know. There's no one on earth who knows more than everybody else on earth, right? Right? It's just like, and you could not find, even though process of elimination will tell you somewhere is actually the world's most foremost expert in anything, you'll never find them, and that person doesn't think they're that person. So you are an expert in what you do. But let's say you actually wanted to present as a generalist, and that was your unique angle. Maybe that what you're doing is talking to give me an example. Who are you talking to? Let's do it for real.
Others
Who would be
that
your
in
audience?
that situation, generalists, people that are okay. I won't use the term expert anymore, but I'll use someone that is multi-passionate, multi-talent, if you want, almost like a unicorn that knows web design, marketing, copywriting, I don't know, interview, podcasting, whatever. They know a lot of things, and they kind of struggle to find a lane instead of leveraging those multitude of skills to build that lane.
Right. And so you're on stage. So what they want is a successful business. They want to have a successful business. Is that fair to say? You're on stage in front of these people. They want to, like, we'll just go real basic for right now. This is not what we would do if we were spending real time on this. But it's like they want a successful business. They think they're struggling because they think that they don't have enough expertise in any one thing, that they're just too distracted, they're too unfocused, right? They have too many different things that they do, right? And so you're going to, and then of course, and that's a problem, stakes. So let's answer the next question. So that was the premise, stakes. That's a problem because folks who are more confident or more clear in their marketing are going to get more clients. And if they're unfocused about what they do and who they are, they're going to have trouble getting clients, and eventually they won't be able to feed their families and all their kids will die, right? Okay, so that's the, don't do that. That's the stakes. Don't do that. So that's the stakes. So why should I listen to you specifically on this? So you, Gabe, now this is when you would tell me a story, an anecdote about a time in your life when being multi-passionate saved you, or made something better, made it easier. So what's the first time you can remember realizing that that the fact that you were good enough at a bunch of different things was actually very useful? Or the most recent time you remember that, or the best time you remember?
Yeah, actually it's a couple of times when I enter an engagement with a client for a one-off project, and going through that, I realized they are facing a multitude of problems in their business that I had knowledge about. So I could help with those as well. And one-off project turned into a monthly retainer, which led to multi-yearly retainer and so on. So that was one example. And of course, I can think of probably many others if I will dive deep into that. But you tell me if that will be, in theory, trusty enough, because people will say, all right, I was in that situation, but I say no because I wasn't confident enough in my skills to help with the other thing.
Yeah. And so that's the question. So if you're going to tell that story, what you would do is you would set it up as, I'm on a Zoom call, or I'm on a, call with, a person like this, right? This person, they come in with this problem, and I know that I can help them with this thing. But I notice that there's some other issues, going on in their business. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be a complete solution for them, but I need the money, so I decide to take it, right? Whatever the truest version, I'm making it up because I don't know the actual story, but you tell about that moment, right? And so I go for it. So you put yourself in the audience's shoes. They're worried that maybe they don't know enough about everything. They're not confident in all of their skills yet, but they need, right? So you do that. And then you talk about, and so as we're solving this problem, something else comes up. And normally I would have to refer them off to somebody, but I'm like, I know enough about that. I can probably take care of this for them. And so I work on that. I do some research. I figure it out. The client is thrilled. It turns into a multi-month retainer. At the end of it, this client solved all their problems. They spent way less than they would have spent going to a whole bunch of other people, if they had to add it all up individually. So they spent less overall. I got paid way more than I would have, and through that process realized that my multi-passionate, interests, right? Me being a generalist is actually a superpower. This is a weapon if you are confident in using it, right? So you tell that story.
Nice, love that.
And people are like, okay, like you have been through this, you get me, and you are qualified to take me on this journey. That's all your story needs to do. You get it, and you're qualified.
But maybe the audience will say, all right, but why not go with the quote-unquote experts in that particular field to get help rather than trust you?
In other words, what the audience is doing now is they're putting objections up, right?
Exactly.
Right? They're starting to go, why? Okay, so obviously you're qualified to take me on this journey, but maybe this only works for you, maybe not for me. There's all these other things I'm worried about, right? Which is exactly the next question that people ask themselves. That's why it's in the 8 questions. The very next question people ask themselves is, why can't I do what I've already been doing? Or don't I already know how to solve this problem? Or isn't there something else going on here, right? In other words, what they're doing is saying, isn't there a different way to deal with this that has nothing to do with you? And so this is the time for you to bring up any of those potential objections. After you've told the story, they see you as trustworthy, but they're still like, I don't know if this is going to work for me. That's when you get to start talking about, okay, so if you're in this situation that I was in, you have a few options, right? One option is give up. You're not an expert in any of these things. Experts will always be better and smarter than you. You may as well roll over and quit. That's an option. Probably not a great option. Chances are it's not the one you want to take. Of course, if you do that, you got to find something else to do. What are the odds this problem doesn't just show up again somewhere else? Okay, so we're not going to just roll over. Obviously, we're going to confront this thing. So how else might you tackle this problem? How else might you do it? The answer could be, you could decide to become an expert in one of those things and only focus on that. Not a bad idea, right? What would be the advantage of that? But what would be the disadvantage of that? So what you do is you start taking the audience through all of the potential ways that they could engage with this, and you remove for them all of the ways that because you're the expert in this, that either don't work as well as you'd think, or do work short term but lead to long-term negative consequences, right? Because becoming an expert in just one thing, choosing one, is a way to solve this problem. But you might say to your audience, I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying this might be something you believe is true, right? I'm doing this from your perspective. You might say to your audience, listen, becoming an expert is one way to solve this. If you're worried that being a multi-passionate and knowing just enough about all these things is not going to get you where you want to go, then you can just pick one of them and just totally dedicate your whole life force to that one thing and become the best of the best. But, right? And then you get to go, what's the downside of doing that? Well, one, you don't really know which of these things you're most passionate about you'd want to spend all of your time on. You're committing pretty hard once you do that, right? And there's a good chance that if one of these things was actually a bigger passion for you, you'd have already pursued that path. That good chance that you actually get joy from doing lots of different things and knowing enough about them. But even if you did become an expert, you commit all that time, there's no telling that the world won't change by the time 3, 4, 5 years from now you're actually the expert in that and nobody will be interested in that. Maybe the robots will be doing that, right? So you, as the speaker, Gabe, you get to remove all of the options for somebody until they're finally left with no other way to solve this problem. And you got to appreciate what you're doing as a speaker to people at this point. It's a little cruel, but it's cruel for their benefit. You are actually digging them into an even deeper hole than they started the talk in. At the beginning of the talk, they have the problem. They want something and they're struggling to get it. And now you've removed all of the ways they've even thought about solving it, right? That they could even imagine solving it or going after it, and show them that none of those are going to work or a good idea. They're actually in worse shape than they were at the beginning of the talk, which is why they have to listen to you, which is why they're going to ask the question, okay, well, if none of these things work, then what should I do instead? That's the obvious next question, and that's when you finally get to actually talk about what you think they should do.
And while this is for their benefit, it's a bit cruel, right? It's a bit manipulative, but in the same time, in order for them to change behavior, if they don't truly understand that all the other solutions that they tried and either fail at it or they didn't even try for various reasons might not work, and you give them the opportunity to hear a new perspective that will probably be a better solution for them, and like build that thing in order for them to actually, all right, I can change, I can see there is another way. And is this the hardest things to do, to truly show them once you did all this foundational work until here, to show them, all right, this is the alternative, this is the solution?
Yeah, this is the part of the talk that everyone we work with struggles with the most, because it is the most counterintuitive. And it is just kind of like the least obvious thing to do. It feels negative to do it if you haven't done this before. It also feels like a waste of time. Speakers will say, I don't want to spend all this time on things that are not the solution. Like, I just want to tell them the solution. The problem is telling them the solution when they have a whole bunch of other options that feel like good ideas and they don't know why. Whatever you tell them is going to feel like a lot of work, and anything they already know about feels like less work. Right? Things people would rather continue doing something that doesn't work than try something new that might work. Right? We would always rather the devil you know. Like, it's just how human behavior works. We just don't like to do new things because it feels like a lift. You have to have a really good reason to do something new. And you're about to give them something new that probably they haven't thought about or haven't heard of before. Right? Otherwise, if you're going to tell them something that they've heard a billion times, like, what's the point of this talk, right? So if you're going to introduce them to a new way of thinking or give them something to do that feels hard, you need it to be the only option. Like, otherwise, they're going to take the path of least resistance. Your hard thing has to be the path of least resistance. You know what I mean? So is it cruel? No, I don't. I was joking when I said that. I don't actually think it's cruel. What I actually think it is a kindness. It's a kindness, because if I had 2 different fridge repair people come look at my fridge before it leaked. Both times they gave me a quote on what it would be to fix it. I didn't like the price, figured I don't really need to have a functional water filter. That just feels like a privileged kind of a nonsense. So I won't fix it. Neither of them did me the kindness of saying, here are your options. 1, you can fix it. It costs this. 2, you can buy a new fridge. It costs this. 3, you can do nothing. It costs you nothing, but you run the risk of flooding your kitchen, which will do all of these things. Nobody did me the kindness of talking me through my available options. I don't consider this manipulative. What I consider this is actually the opposite of manipulative. It's actually giving the audience the ability to understand the options available to them so they can make a good decision. You cannot, people misunderstand persuasion. It is almost impossible to persuade someone to do something that they don't want to do. And the people who know how to do that, it's like the sharky salespeople. Like if you think the people who are in timeshare sales, they're the people that know how to force you into making a decision that you didn't want to make. Everybody regrets it and hates you. So you don't want to do that. What you want to do is give people the ability to influence themselves, right? You need them to come to the idea. They have to feel like at the end of the talk, changing their behavior was their idea. And the only way to do that is to give them the argument in a way that makes sense to them and stack it in the right order so that they can follow the logic and come to that themselves, right? So yes, it's hard to do. It feels awkward to do if you've never done this as a speaker. It is the linchpin of the system. The system doesn't work if you don't do this.
Because you give empathy to the wrong approaches. Yes. And once you do that, how actually people take action once they understand there is a different way?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so at this point, when people ask, well, what should I do instead? It's interesting because I said now you can give them the solution. The truth is they're actually not ready for the solution yet. It's the only time in my system that you don't answer the question people actually asked in their head. They think they want the solution. What you first need to do is give them a paradigm shift. You need to show them a different way of thinking, because if you want someone to do something different, they have to think different first, right? First, they have to change how they think in order to change what they do. So first, you need to show them, here's a new way of thinking about the problem, or here's a new way of thinking about the solution, right? And then once you've changed how they think, my favorite example of this, I was in a workshop that Seth Godin was running many years ago. Here, I'll drop that name. So I was in a workshop that Seth Godin was running years ago called the Freelancers Workshop, and I was complaining about some of my clients. This was 7, 8 years ago, whatever it was. I was complaining about some really difficult clients, and Seth floored me. He stopped and he said, in a group setting, he said, you're self-employed. You get to choose your clients. Why would you choose clients who are a pain in the ass to work with? He didn't say pain in the ass. I inserted that. He wouldn't. Basically, he said, in other words, what he did was he shifted my thinking. He said, you're self-employed. Your clients don't choose you. You choose your clients. Now, think about what the normal LinkedIn guru would have said if I had complained about my clients. They would have said, here's how to establish a contract that makes sure people can't do that. Here's what to say when they start bitching. Here's how to do lead generation here's how to change your intake form. They would have given me solutions, none of which would have worked because I was going to be thinking the same way. The solutions wouldn't have mattered. Meanwhile, Seth changed my thinking. He said, you get to choose your clients. I went, oh, I didn't need to know any of the tactics yet, the actual solutions. But now that I'm thinking differently, I can go find them. Solutions are easy. They're everywhere. They're easy to find. But we have to be thinking properly. So first you change how they think, and then they go, okay, so how do I get started, right? After you change their thinking, they go, how do I get started? Now you give them your solution. Tell them what you want them to do. What's the tactic? What's the hack? What's the technique? What's the simplest thing that they can do soon, right? And my quick 3-step criteria for a great action step is it is simple, achievable, and time-bound. So simple, they know what you want them to do. Achievable, they actually feel like it's possible to do it. And time-bound, they're going to try it soon or within a set time frame that you've given them. My example about this is I hear human connection speakers say things like, after today, I want you to go out and make meaningful connections with everyone you meet. Oh, fuck me. Like that's impossible, man. What a crazy thing to say. Useless.
Especially
No one's going to do that.
if you're in a crowded space in a conference or somewhere where right, and you turn around, I should meaningfully connect with everyone behind me.
It's crazy. But on the other hand, what I tell people is before you leave the room, I want you to, or before you leave the event today, or before you leave the room today, I want you to introduce yourself to one new person. Now, simple, achievable, time bound. Simple, what are you supposed to do? Introduce yourself to one new person. Okay, you know what you're supposed to do. Achievable, it's achievable because 10 minutes ago in this talk, I gave you 5 different ways to introduce yourself to a stranger. We've gone through this already. So it's achievable because I've already told you how to do that. And it's time bound, I said, before you leave the room or before you leave the event. And so everybody can do it, and so everybody does do it. Everybody tries it, and the organizers come back freaking out because everybody was using the stuff. They've never seen so many people using the stuff a speaker talked about so quickly. And it's like, yeah, because that's how you create change. And if people try the simple, achievable, time-bound thing that you think is too stupid, too easy, too obvious, when they do the really simple thing, they get a hit. And they go, oh, this works. What that stupid eyebrows magician guy talked about for an hour works. Maybe I'll do the harder thing. Maybe I'll introduce myself to a stranger. Maybe I'll try to turn to that person at Starbucks and say hello and risk rejection, right? Maybe I'll take the perspective of a colleague who's saying something I don't agree with politically, right? If you can get them to try and do a simple thing, they're much more likely to trust that your whole system works and try the harder thing, which is how real change is created.
Yeah, what I love about that and about the structure of the one-page keynote is that you truly have a framework for it. And I have it here on the side. You have the 3 stages, like introduction, argument, and conclusion. And you already went to the first 2. And even for the action step, you have break it down in smaller steps that you just share to actually act right there and then. And before you share how the success can look like if they take action and the core message and the mic drop, which is their next steps, how you come up with these systems and frameworks when you not just build your speech, but you design your business and everything.
Yeah. So how I came to all of this was a relentless commitment to speeches that actually work and don't merely look like they work. I was just never interested. I come from magic, right? So I was a full-time magician for a decade. I've been doing magic all my life, traveled the world as a magician. And when I moved into speaking, it was very easy for me to get applause, to get laughter, to get all the superficial cues of success. And in magic, those are the cues of success. Laughter, applause, those are the cues. It worked. The problem in speaking is that it became incredibly obvious that just because people enjoyed while I was on stage, that I was charismatic, that I was funny, that I was engaging, that I did a little bit of magic, that I was interactive, I told some stories, doing that did not create change. And I just kept going, what's the point of giving a speech if nothing changes? And so I had to keep going, how do I make sure that I'm not losing people or that I'm not merely entertaining them? Which is where the design over the design over delivery philosophy eventually was born. And it was one thing to do it for myself, but when people started reaching out and asking me, have you ever coached a speaker? Have you ever helped? And I was sure, I don't know. Yes, of course, all the time, absolutely. Just say yes first, figure it out later. When I started doing that, I was working with people who did not have the delivery skills. They were not charismatic performers. They didn't come from entertainment. And so there was nowhere to hide. It was like, well, they're not going to be funny. This is not a funny person. They're stumbling over their words. They've got to talk in 3 weeks. I don't have time to get them 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours on stage to become smooth performers. So I realized the only way this works is if I focus on the words that come out of their mouth. If I just focus on the words and the order, because I don't have time to deal with the delivery, the charisma. And what I watched happen over and over again was if you can get somebody to design the speech properly, one, their confidence goes up. When they believe that this system was built properly to respect the audience meticulously, they believe the speech is going to work, and that confidence translates into better performances. Okay? So they tend to actually end up being better speakers just by a natural consequence of their confidence that the speech was built properly. Because a lot of times speakers they're not nervous because it's some people have clinical anxiety getting up in front of an audience. Separating out those people, and we know some people like that, they need to see a therapist, or, there's lots of options for them. Most people are nervous getting in front of an audience because they're simply not convinced it's going to work. They're worried that what they're going to say is not interesting, is not relevant, is not going to do the job that they're there to do. So when I go, look, boom, just do this, these things in this order, it will work. They're like, great. And they trust that it's going to work, and so they give good performances. But two, you asked, how did I end up breaking all this stuff down? It was like, well, when did it break down? When did the speech stop working? Are people not engaging with it? Are you losing people at certain points? Are they not? What are they saying on the feedback forms? Let's get really, really honest about this. And then I just kept going, okay, like action steps. Why don't people do them? Well, either they don't understand it, they don't think they can do it, right? They think high likelihood of failure, or they were not given a time frame in which to do it. Okay, so those three things. Just do all. If it's always those three things, then I know they'll do the action step. It's like, why aren't they taking my solution? Oh, they're thinking the same way they used to think. They have an old belief that's preventing them from trying your solution, so I need to change a belief somehow. Okay, well, why can't they change that belief? It's like, why are they having so much trouble with this belief? Oh, because they think that there's all these other options that might work that are easier. Oh, okay, let's deal with that. It was just a relentless, just over and over and over again until I figured out these are the elements. This is what works. And then we put it into practice in like the highest stakes environments where people cannot fail over and over and over again, right? We're not doing this in a lab. We're not doing this at Toastmasters, like with due respect. Like we're not doing this where people are only speaking in a comfy room of other speakers where there's a safe space for feedback, right? We're like, get up and give a TED talk. Get up and give a pitch to a group of investors. Get up and give an address to your entire team that this family-owned company of 100 years is going to be purchased by a national conglomerate. Right? These are high stakes environments. The results matter. They can't fail. And so I tested my frameworks in real environments over and over again until it was seamless. And that's what this book is.
And if anyone wanted more reasons to get the book, you just share it. And the link will be down below, but we are not done yet. We have the conclusion.
Yeah. I'll rapid fire this for you. So what are the last couple of questions people ask? So it's like, all right, should I pay attention to this? Yes. Does this really matter? Yes. Why should I listen to you? Because I have a unique perspective. Can I do things I already know how to do, I've already heard about? No, they don't work the way you would think they would, or they don't work at all. Well, then what should I do instead? Actually, let's have a new way of thinking about this first. Fantastic. How do I get started? Action step. Okay. Last three questions people ask in their heads, and this all happens in the very final phase of the talk. It's very close to the end. They go, is it really worth it? This feels like the same question they asked second. The second one was, does this really matter? It's actually the opposite version of this. Does this really matter? Is them saying, is there urgency on this? Is it really worth it? Is them saying, this feels risky. Do I have to? Right? And so you have to paint a picture of success. You have to go, yes, it's really worth it because look at all the long-term positive benefits that you get from doing this thing. If you try it, yes, there's a risk, but the potential risk is way less than the benefits, potential benefits, right? So we stack the odds in our favor. And then they ask, they ask one final question, which is, what was this all about again? It's the last question people ask. What was this all about again? And it sounds stupid, but if you've been on stage for 20, 30, 45 minutes, an hour, no matter how clear and compelling you were, how well structured it was, they will just forget what they listened to. And so you have to leave them with a recap of the core message, right? You have to somehow leave them with, this was the point of this talk, right? The end of my speech is on human connection. I say, every interaction is meaningful. Every person you meet is important. They can forget every other goddamn thing I said for an hour. If they remember me just going, every interaction is meaningful. Every person you meet is important. They got it. They got the core message. They got what I was here to do, right? So those are the 8 questions.
Thank you enough, Brian. And all the links to the book, to your website, and to your social will down below for those listening. I want to end with a quote from the book. The graveyard of great ideas is filled with talks that inspire people for an afternoon and were forgotten by dinner. Thank you so much for writing this book, to putting this framework together, and to have the opportunity to have you again on the show. It was an absolute pleasure, Brian.
Gabe, thanks so much for having me back.
This was Brian Miller on Authority in the Wild. And if you're sitting on an idea that matters and you're tired of watching it lose to noise, this is the work. Brian frameworks aren't theory. They've been pressure tested in rooms where failure isn't an option. Grab the book below in the show notes, and if this episode shifts how you think about your next talk, send it to one expert in your life who needs to hear it. Remember what Brian wrote. The graveyard of great ideas is full of talks that inspire people for an afternoon and were forgotten by dinner. Don't add yours to it. I'm Gabe Marushka, and this was Authority in the Wild. And before you go, make sure to check this episode. I'm sure you'll like it.